The greatest lie ever told isn't found in a holy book. It's the official history written by the victors. 99% of people believe the Dark Ages were a time of brutish ignorance, but what they don't want you to know is that this is the most successful propaganda campaign in human history. You wake not to silence, but to a sound that doesn't belong, a low, rhythmic scraping from beneath the packed earth floor of your longhouse. The air is a heavy blanket of wood smoke, sleeping bodies, and damp wool. The boy is pale, his body caught in the violent, jerky spasms of a raging fever. A low, guttural moan escapes his lips. Ilara's face crumples. "He is burning," she whispers, her voice cracking with a fear so primal it silences the entire longhouse. She takes a staggering step, not toward the man with the biggest axe or the one who speaks to God. She turns and runs toward the dark corner of the hall, toward the one person the church fears more than any army. The one person whose forbidden knowledge is now a child's only hope. She is the Husfreya, the mistress of the house, and the clinking of the iron and bronze keys at her belt is a sound more powerful than a sword drawn from its sheath. This is an ASMR of absolute authority. She isn't watching, she is calculating. Her gaze sweeps over the barrels of Frankish wine, the bolts of Byzantine silk, the amber pulled from distant rivers. Her mind is an abacus, tallying debts, profits, and the shares owed to every man who risked his life on the water. Its hard drives are portable, concealable, and disposable. A staff of wood, a polished piece of whalebone, a flat stone you can skim across a river. A priest in a monastery has his library, a fortress of vellum and ink, centralized and vulnerable. He can control who reads, who learns, who knows. But grandfather's library walks out the door with him. It can be copied in an hour and hidden under a floorboard. It cannot be controlled, and that is why the church branded it demonic. By demonizing the symbols, they could hunt the users. The howl of the berserker wasn't madness. It was the sound of a carefully calibrated psychological weapon being unleashed. And the secret behind it changes everything you think you know about ancient warfare. You are standing at the edge of the training circle, where the mud is a thick, cold porridge of earth and sweat. The air tastes of iron and wet wool. Around you, warriors grunt and slam their shields together, a familiar, rhythmic chaos of practice and brute force. But you're not watching them. Your eyes are fixed on one man. He moves differently. You see flat, smooth river stones inscribed with runes that don't speak of gods, but of boundary lines, of streams and old oaks. You see staves of yew and ash covered in thousands of tiny notches, a record of debts, of promises, of seasons, of lives. Each notch is a day of work owed. Each rune is a field owned. Each line on the whalebone is a marriage sworn, a child born, a bloodline preserved. 99% of people believe your culture is purely oral. A people of song and memory with no written records. They are wrong. They aren't the shuffling footsteps of the monks. It's the measured, iron-shod tread of soldiers. They haven't just erased the past. They are hunting those who dare to uncover it. This tablet is no longer a key to a lost world of wisdom. It's a confession. And in this age of unforgiving faith, it's a death sentence. They told you this life, the life of a Viking, was one of mud, blood, and savagery. But the darkness wasn't a lack of knowledge. It was a fire. A fire set by the new church and its kings to burn the evidence of any world that didn't require them as intermediaries to God or power. The sound you hear isn't a rat. It's the soft scratching of forbidden history being recorded. A secret that, if discovered, would mean the pyre for your entire family. They don't want you to know why the church really burned witches. It had nothing to do with demons and everything to do with medicine. The air in the hut is thick enough to drink, a foul broth of peat smoke, sickness, and despair. You're huddled in the corner, watching a small boy die on a straw pallet. His face is a grotesque mask of swelling, one eye forced shut, his breath a ragged, wet whistle that signals the end. The priest has already been here. This is the secret they buried under 1,000 years of history written by their enemies. 99% of people have been taught that all medieval women were powerless, traded like livestock between fathers and husbands. That is a lie. Here, in the cold, clear light of the North, a woman could inherit property. She could run a business. She could stand before the assembly, the thing, and demand a divorce from a man who shamed her or struck her. In her husband's absence, she was not a steward. She was the law. Killing a rune master wasn't just murder. It was an act of cultural warfare. It was the medieval equivalent of a modern state shutting down the entire internet, banning encrypted messaging, and burning every book, all to install their own state-sanctioned operating system. By destroying the men like your grandfather, they could erase an entire people's cultural database and ensure that history was written only by them, in their language, from their single, controllable point of view. The fact this has been so effectively hidden is proof of how successful they were. The scraping stops. While the others are all sharp angles and explosive effort, he flows like dark water. His shield arm is loose, his axe held low. His eyes are the most terrifying part. They aren't focused, they are glazed, looking through the world, not at it. He makes no sound, but you can feel a vibration coming from him, a low hum that sinks into your bones. This is what the priests warn you about. This is demonic possession, they say. The spirit of a bear or a wolf entering a man, a madness sent by pagan gods to unmake Christian souls. This is the truth the church and the kings want buried forever. This is your blockchain, a decentralized, distributed ledger of histories, property rights, and legal claims, held not by a central authority, but by the people themselves. It cannot be burned in a single fire. It cannot be altered by a king's decree. It is a history that remembers. At the center of the small cellar, her back to you, sits the vulva. The scraping sound is her. In the low, flickering light of a tallow lamp, you see her hunched over a fresh piece of ash wood. This is the most dangerous thing you will ever touch. It is not a weapon of steel, but of ink, and it has killed more people than any sword. The vulva's hands, mapped with the rivers of 100 hard years, tremble as she offers it to you. The air in her hut is thick with the smell of wood smoke, dried moss, and something else, the dry, dusty scent of forgotten time. You take the single page of parchment. It is heavier than it looks, stiff with age. The edges ragged where it was violently torn from its home. The very world you inhabit, with its sophisticated medicine, its democratic law, and its deep astronomical knowledge, is being systematically erased, written over by a narrative of monstrosity to justify its destruction. This is the same tactic used today. Manufacture fear, create an other, and sell the solution. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Or at least, the version of it they sold you. He took their last silver coin, muttered some Latin, and left the boy in God's hands. Now, he's in hers, the vulva. You expect chance, smoke, the rattling of bones. You expect magic. What you get is terrifyingly, impossibly modern. She isn't a crone. Her eyes are sharp and clear, her hands steady as a stonemason's. She says nothing, her silence a stark contrast to the parents' frantic weeping. You watch as she unwraps a shard of polished black stone, an obsidian knife that glints in the firelight like a sliver of frozen night. The men unloading that ship know that a portion of this wealth belongs to her and the other women of the Longhouse, by a right as unshakable as the mountains. Her power isn't a fluke granted by a kind husband. It is the bedrock of this society. And sometimes, that power was not just in keys, but in steel. For centuries, historians scoffed at the sagas of shield maidens, dismissing them as poetic fantasy. They found a grave at Birka, Sweden, a tomb of the highest honor. It was filled with weapons, a sword, an axe, spears, armor-piercing arrows. The sudden silence is louder than the sound it replaced. Grandfather looks up, his eyes catching the lamplight, and they hold the weight of 1,000 books he has never seen. He has finished. He holds the slender piece of you out to you. It feels strangely warm in your cold hands. On it is the history of your bloodline, a cure for the lung sickness, and the story of your gods. It is a crime to hold it. It is death to be caught with it. He nods once, a silent command. Learn, remember, survive. But what they don't want you to know is that this is no more a demon than a blacksmith's fire is a dragon's breath. It's a science, a hidden military technology so effective the only defense their enemies had was to slander it into myth. 99% of people will hear the stories of a warrior who bites his shield, feels no pain, and possesses the strength of 10 men, and they will call it a fable. But what you are witnessing is the result of a precise and repeatable process. The secret is buried in ritual. A small, sharp flint knife moves with surgical precision in her wrinkled hand. She is carving a new name into a family's lineage, connecting it to a great-grandmother whose bones are now dust in the churchyard. She isn't telling a story. She is updating the code. You realize the terrifying truth. To control the future, you must own the past. The king's history, written on expensive vellum, says his grandfather was granted this land by God. But the notched stave on that shelf says your family paid for it with 3 generations of sweat and blood. The main text is written in a severe, beautiful Latin, the work of a man who believed his every stroke was guided by God. But that's not what she wants you to see. She points a single, gnarled finger to the margins. There, in a script so faint it looks like a ghost's breath on the vellum, is a second story. The ink is watered down, a pale, apologetic gray. It's a confession, meant to be invisible. Archaeological discoveries of intricate surgical tools and complex legal structures, long suppressed or misinterpreted, now prove this was a deliberate cultural assassination. So what is that scraping sound beneath your feet? It's the first breadcrumb in a conspiracy that spans 1,000 years. By the end of this day, you will never trust a history book again. If you love immersive real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Instead of waving it over the boy, she drops it into a small pot of boiling water. The hiss it makes is the only sound in the hut. This is the detail 99% of people miss. It's not a ritual of purification. It's sterilization. She pulls a strip of pale bark from a leather pouch and gives it to the boy's mother. Make him chew. You don't know it's willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the active compound in aspirin. A secret passed down in whispers while the church preached that suffering was piety. 2 horses were sacrificed to carry the owner to the afterlife. For over 100 years, they displayed it as the ultimate example of a Viking male warrior chieftain. They wrote books about him. They drew pictures of his magnificent beard. Then, in 2017, a team of scientists, armed with new technology, tested the bones. A shockwave ripped through the academic world. The skeleton, the high-ranking warrior, the one buried with the full honors of a warlord, was a woman. The proof was undeniable, written in her very DNA. The floorboards above you creak, a heavy footstep. It is not the wind. A shadow blocks the sliver of moonlight from the smoke hole. Someone else knows a secret is being saved tonight, and they have come to delete it. Days before a battle, he is separated. He fasts. He is guided through breathing exercises that alter his perception, a rhythmic chanting that feels like it's rewiring his brain. He drinks a bitter tea, brewed from herbs like henbane, a plant that in the right dose doesn't just numb pain, but unhinges the mind from fear. It induces a state of suggestion, a battle trance. This isn't a frenzy, it's a form of weaponized hypnosis. The state is carefully built, layer by layer, until the man you knew is gone, and what remains is a tool. The church is history, says they brought order. But the runic tablets map a world of laws and agreements that existed long before their first cross shadowed this land. You are standing in a trove of forbidden pasts, a library of truths that could unravel a kingdom. The scraping stops. The sudden silence is a physical blow, a vacuum that sucks the air from your lungs. You freeze, a prisoner of the darkness and the sudden, terrifying quiet. Slowly, the old woman turns, her face a mask of shadows, her eyes ancient and dark as the earth around you. Find yours. Your fingers trace the words as you read them aloud, your voice a shocked whisper that the crackling fire seems to lean in to hear. They command us to write of devils with horns and claws, it reads. We are to turn their shield maidens into monstrous witches, and their thing into a lawless brawl. We write not what is, but what must be true for God's kingdom to expand. We paint them as the darkness, so that our King may be the light. God forgive me for the truth we burn. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 878. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. The metallic taste of your own fear coats your tongue as the vulva retrieves the steaming knife. She leans over the boy, and for a heart-stopping second, she looks like a predator. But her touch is gentle, her voice a low command. Hold him. The incision is a single, swift, fluid motion, not a frenzied attack, but a calculated, clean cut. There is a terrible release of blood and pus, and the boy screams. But then, for the first time in 2 days, he takes a full, deep breath. It's not magic, it's surgery. They had hidden this truth not with malice, but with the blindness of their own assumptions. They simply could not conceive of a world where a woman could hold that much deadly authority. You look back at the woman on the shore, the keyholder. You see the warrior in her stance. This is why her world had to be destroyed. To the south, in the rapidly expanding empires of Christian Europe, a different order was taking root. A world where a woman was legally the property of her father until she became the property of her husband. The ship doesn't look right. Under the bruised purple of a fading sky, its lines are too broad for a pure Norse longship, its sail patched with a foreign weave. The men who haul the heavy tarred ropes are a fractured tribe of faces. The pale braided hair of the north stands beside the high cheekbones of the Slavs. And directing them all is a man with the clipped beard and nervous eyes of a Frankish merchant, trying desperately to look like he belongs. You can hear it now, the wet, percussive sound of his teeth grinding together, a low, constant rasp of bone against bone, the only outward sign of the storm building within him. When his opponent charges, the berserker doesn't block. He absorbs the shield bash with his shoulder, a blow that would shatter another man's collarbone, and he doesn't even flinch. His glazed eyes flicker for a moment, and then his axe moves. It's not a wild swing. It is an unnervingly fluid, impossibly fast arc that lands with a sickening crunch. He feels no pain. He has no self-preservation. There is no surprise in them. There is only a terrible, patient knowing. And you understand, with a cold drop of dread in your gut, that you weren't supposed to find this by accident. You were chosen. The vellum is so dry it makes a faint, whispery rasp against your thumb, like the sound of sand on a burial shroud. It's not anger you feel first. It's a cold, hollowing sickness that starts in your stomach and crawls up your spine, raising the hairs on your arms. This isn't a story. This is an invoice for a war. This is the blueprint for the destruction of a people. 99% of the world will only ever know the lie. They will read these chronicles as fact, build kingdoms on their words, and call it history. The greatest weapon ever used against your people wasn't a sword. It was a story about how you smelled. You break the skin of ice on the water bucket, the crack sharp in the morning stillness. The cold bites your fingers, a familiar and honest pain. You step outside your longhouse, and the air is so clean it hurts to breathe, scented with pine smoke and the coming frost. The myth they will write about you is one of filth, of unwashed brutes wallowing in their own waste. In this moment, you understand a truth buried for 1,000 years. Archaeologists have found the evidence, Viking-era skulls from a century before, bearing the perfectly healed marks of trepanation, brain surgery, with a shocking 70% survival rate. This knowledge wasn't lost. It was declared demonic. It was hunted. Why? Because a population that can heal itself does not need to beg a priest for a miracle. A people who are self-reliant cannot be easily ruled. It's the same reason modern systems often seek to discredit or regulate holistic practices that empower the individual over centralized authority. Where her testimony was worthless, her inheritance stolen by male relatives, her body a vessel for sins defined by men in black robes. The chroniclers of that world, the monks who wrote the histories we read today, looked at this Norse woman and saw not strength, but a monster, an aberration, a perversion of God's natural order. So they didn't just conquer the Vikings with swords and crosses, they conquered them with ink. They wrote her out of the story. They turned the powerful Husfreyja into a screeching Valkyrie, a demonic seductress, a pagan witch. You stand in the shadows of the wharf, the wet sound of the hull kissing the moss-slicked pylons echoing in the cold air. They aren't just trading furs and amber. They are committing a sin far deeper than piracy, a sin that could get every soul on board burned. 99% of people believe the Vikings were just savage raiders, a storm of axe and fire. What the church doesn't want you to know is that their true, unforgivable crime wasn't theft, but connection. He has become a shock-and-awe tactic made of flesh and blood. The structured Roman-style shield walls of European armies, built on discipline and predictable formations, had no answer for this. How do you fight an enemy who doesn't fear dying? How do you break a line that doesn't feel the sword? You can't. So you change the story. You don't call it a tactical advantage. You call it demonic. You don't call it a sophisticated use of psychotropic compounds and mental conditioning. You call it madness. By branding it as unholy, you strip it of its scientific legitimacy. The greatest lie of the Middle Ages isn't about demons or dragons. It's the one that says all wars are fought with steel. You are deep beneath the floorboards, in a cellar that smells of wet earth and sleeping stone. The air is so cold, it feels like a solid thing in your lungs. Your torch flame throws frantic, dancing shadows against carved runestones, their edges worn smooth by centuries of secrets. Your fingers, numb and dirty, find a sealed tube of cured leather hidden behind a loose stone. It feels ancient, forbidden. You break the wax seal. But you are holding the proof of the crime. The savage, the horned devil, the barbarian at the gates. It was all a story. A ghost story told to frighten Christian children and justify the crusades that came for your people. It's the oldest form of war, not conquering land, but conquering memory. If you can make a people believe they were always monsters, they will eventually forget they were ever human. This single piece of parchment confirms that the savage Viking was an invention, a character created to justify cultural genocide. But what they don't want you to know is that the first thing that greets you each morning is the clean, sharp scent of lye soap. You walk to the stream, the frozen ground crunching under your leather boots. The water is a shock, a jolt that wakes every nerve in your body. But you embrace it. You unbind your hair, letting it fall, and begin to wash. This isn't vanity. This is a ritual. It is a declaration. 99% of people, for the next 1,000 years, will have this image of you completely backward. The ultimate power has always been control over who lives and who dies. The boy will live, no thanks to a prayer. But because of ancient knowledge, the church was actively trying to burn from the world. You look at the vulva, her hands now stained, but her work complete. She is not a witch. She is a doctor. And that makes her the most dangerous person in the village. As she wipes the obsidian blade clean, you realize you are no longer just a witness. You are an accomplice to a crime against God and the king. They erased her legal rights from their records, demonized her freedom, and buried the evidence of her power so deeply that it became a myth. It's a pattern you still see today, how easily the contributions and power of women are downplayed or erased to make the current power structure feel inevitable, natural, and divinely ordained. A man, a trader from the south with a cross around his neck, approaches her. He bows his head slightly, but his eyes are cold, appraising. He doesn't see a partner in commerce. He sees a problem to be solved. Their trade routes were the dark web of the medieval age, a sprawling, unregulated network for goods and ideas that no king or pope could control. Archaeologists keep finding the proof, the glitches in the official history. An Abbasid Caliphate coin, stamped with Arabic script, unearthed from the frozen soil of a Swedish farm. A single shimmering thread of Chinese silk, woven in the east and buried with a Viking jarl in the cold English ground. This is the evidence of a system operating entirely outside of authority. And tonight, you see it breathe. You make it something to be feared, but not something to be studied or copied. It is the exact same strategy a modern superpower uses when it calls an enemy's unconventional tactics barbaric, while in a secret desert facility, their own scientists are developing performance-enhancing drugs and neural links to create their own version of a super soldier. The lie is the same, separated only by time. They hide the science to maintain control of the narrative. The warrior in the circle finally lets out the sound. The sound is a dry crack, like a breaking bone in the suffocating silence. Inside are 2 rolls of vellum. The first you unroll is a miracle. It's a map of the coastline, from the northern islands down past the shores of Francia. It is shockingly precise. You can see the inlets, the hidden coves, the treacherous shoals, details that could only be known by men who have spent their lives on the longships. This is not some Christian mappa mundi, with Jerusalem at the center and monsters at the edges. A map of faith, not of water and rock. It's a feeling we still know today. The sudden, nauseating realization that the official story, the one taught in schools and preached from pulpits, is a carefully constructed weapon. The history you know was deliberately fabricated for political and religious conquest. The crawling sensation on your skin is the realization that entire centuries of fact are built on this foundational lie. The question is no longer what happened. It is how deep does the lie go? What else about you is a lie? Your gods? Your ancestors? Your own name? They will be taught about the stinking pagan, the barbarian too savage for soap. But deep in the earth, archaeologists will find the truth buried with your bones. They will unearth countless combs carved from antler, delicate bronze tweezers, and tiny ear spoons. Far more grooming tools than they will ever find in the graves of the civilized Christian settlements to the south. As you scrape a comb through your wet hair, the teeth pulling at the knots with a satisfying, scratching sound against your scalp, you remember the stories from the traders, and the penalty for that crime is fire, an unnatural order that must be corrected. The wind picks up, and for a moment, the jangling of her keys sounds like the rattling of a cage door, but you can't tell if it's locking or being broken open. Her power is the lifeblood of her people, but it is also the very thing that has marked them for extinction. A new god is coming, carried on ships like this one, a god that demands a woman's silence, and his followers have a long, patient history of making sure he gets what he wants. The public cargo comes off first. Bales of gray wolf fur, cloudy chunks of Baltic amber. But as true night falls, the real work begins. The Frankish merchant nods, and a hidden hatch is opened. The sound it makes is a low groan, like a man in pain. From the guts of the ship, they unload not barrels of wine or chests of silver, but long, flat parcels wrapped in oilcloth and tied with waxed cord. You watch as one is passed down, the exchange happening in a hushed language that is a mix of three tongues. It starts low, that hum you felt earlier, and it builds into a howl that isn't human. It is the sound of a psychological bomb detonating. It's not a cry of rage, it is a broadcast. It says, "Your rules of combat do not apply here. Your God cannot save you from me. Your steel will break before my will does." It is meant to shatter your morale before the first blow even lands. They told you it was the devil roaring from a stolen throat. This is a map of pure, practical pagan knowledge. The kind of knowledge the church wants to burn. But it's the second map that stops your heart. It's cruder, drawn with a less certain hand, but you recognize it instantly. The curve of the river, the standing stones, the old oak on the ridge. This is your land. These are the fields your ancestors bled for, the forests they hunted, the ground where they are buried. But it has been altered. New lines have been drawn in a darker ink. The parchment in your hand is no longer a page. It's a key to one prison, and perhaps the door to a much, much larger one. You hear of the English priests who complain that your people are too clean. They bathe weekly, on the day you call Lagerdag, wash day. They groom their beards and change their woolen tunics. And this, the chroniclers write in their vellum books, makes your warriors dangerously attractive to their women. The first war was never one of armies. It was a war of image. This act of washing is a rejection of their entire world. Their priests teach that the body is a prison of sin, that filth and suffering bring one closer to their God. The most terrifying weapon in this world is not the axe swinging in your direction. It's the silence that comes right before a single spoken word changes your life forever. You feel it now, a cold weight in the pit of your stomach that has nothing to do with the damp wind slicing across the field. Your breath mists in the air, carrying the scent of wet wool, livestock, and the metallic tang of fear from the man standing beside you. There is no throne here, no crown, no velvet, no stone walls to muffle the truth. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. The corner of one parcel catches on a splinter. For a heartbeat, the cloth tears and you see it. Not the glint of metal, but the pale, creamy edge of vellum. It's a book, and in this world, some books are more dangerous than any sword. This is the real contraband. Pagan philosophy, copied by Irish monks who still remembered the old gods. Medical texts from Baghdad, filled with diagrams of the human body, so detailed they are considered blasphemy here. Jars of rare herbs that can ease a fever the priests blame on demons. But the forbidden truth is far more chilling. It's the sound of the human mind, pushed past its known limits for one terrifying purpose. And if they could weaponize the mind like this 1,000 years ago, what other forgotten sciences have they convinced us were only ever magic and myth? A different name is written across the top, the name of a grasping Northumbrian lord who speaks of God while counting his silver. And in the corner, pressed into a splotch of dark red wax, is a royal seal. Your thumbnail scrapes against the wax. It feels wrong. The impression is too shallow, the edges too soft. It's a forgery, a lie given the weight of a kingdom. This is the secret that 99% of people will never learn about the expansion of power. They don't want you to know that the most devastating conquests weren't won on the battlefield. The sun bleeds across the fjord, thin and cold. You see the village with new eyes. The overnight frost glitters on the thatch, but you are not looking at the beauty. You are listening to the silence. The scraping from the cellar has stopped, and you finally understand. It wasn't the sound of a monster. It was the sound of a memory fighting for its life. The desperate scratch of a knife on wood, a chisel on bone. They preach that to deny the flesh is to elevate the soul. You look at your own hands, clean and strong in the cold water, and you know this to be a lie. To you, the body is a vessel for adventure, for strength, for life. To care for it is to honor the gods who gave it to you. The lie of the unclean pagan is the most powerful tool of dehumanization they have. There is only the gray sky, the circle of hard faces, and the ancient law stone, slick with moss and memory. An argument has shattered the morning peace. Einar, his face a mask of fury and desperation, claims his prize cow and 2 sheep were taken in the night. His gaze is fixed on Bjorn, a man whose hands are just as calloused, whose life is just as fragile. In the world you've been told about, a king's guard would drag Bjorn to a dungeon. A priest would condemn his soul. But here, something else is happening. He was captured in a raid on a western island, a life stolen in a storm of axes and screams. That is where the official story, the one told in hushed tones in your lord's hall, ends. He is a thrall, a piece of property, his future a short, brutal line ending in a cold grave. But 99% of people never learn the truth that Einar carries in the hard set of his jaw. Listen. Can you hear it? Not the cry of the gulls or the crash of the waves. Listen closer. It's the sound of his adze. Each item is a spark of knowledge in a world desperate to keep the darkness in. The kings and bishops condemn these men as godless pirates, but it's a lie. It's propaganda. They don't fear their violence. They fear their freedom. It's a direct mirror of how every government in history fights to regulate the new frontier it cannot control. From the printing press to the internet. They fear any system that allows people to exchange ideas without permission. This ship isn't just bringing wealth, it's bringing the future. They told you it was a blood-soaked orgy, a pact with the devil whispered in the dark woods. But what 99% of people never learn is that the real horror wasn't the ritual. It was the lie they told to replace it. Dusk bleeds purple and orange through the skeletal fingers of the trees. You stand shoulder to shoulder with the others, your breath pluming in the cooling air. There's no screaming, no wild-eyed frenzy. There is only a heavy, sacred stillness, thick with the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and crushed juniper. They were one in the quiet, candle-lit scriptoriums of monasteries. While your people were fighting, praying, and dying, literate men in robes were engaged in a different kind of warfare. A war of cartography, a war of documentation. They forged charters, discovered ancient land grants, and drew new maps that, with the stroke of a quill, dispossessed entire clans of their ancestral homes. The land wasn't conquered with the sword. It was stolen with ink. It's the medieval version of a modern corporation using a mountain of incomprehensible legal documents to steal a river from a village. It was the sound of a people trying to carve their truth into something that fire could not consume, something that lies could not rot. The secret they buried under a mountain of skulls is this: the Viking Age was not a war of barbarians against civilization. It was a war between two operating systems for the human soul. One was centralized, built on walls and hierarchies, whispering of salvation in the next life in exchange for total obedience in this one. Its knowledge was chained to altars, written in a language of the powerful. It's the same brutal tactic that will be used for centuries, the same way future empires will paint refugees as diseased or political opponents as vermin, all to strip them of their humanity. It's a simple, terrifying formula. If you can convince your people that the enemy is not truly human, you can justify any atrocity against them. They can be slaughtered like animals because you have already told the world they live like them. Something the kings of the South whisper about with a mixture of disgust and terror. This is the thing, the assembly, where the law doesn't descend from God to a king. It rises from the mud on your own boots. You watch as Einar, a man you've known your whole life, steps into the center of the circle. He doesn't beg for justice from a superior. He demands it from his equals, from you. His voice cracks as he describes the empty pen, the tracks leading toward Bjorn's land. A rhythmic, perfect thunk scrape, shaving a curl of wood as thin as parchment from the rib of a new longship. It's the sound of power. Einar is a master shipwright, a man whose knowledge is woven into the very heart of Viking survival. The Jarl who owns him can beat him, can starve him, but he cannot build this ship without him. And in that simple, undeniable fact, a secret world of leverage is born. This is the knowledge suppressed for centuries by the chroniclers and priests who wrote your history. And as you watch another forbidden book land on the dock with a soft, heavy thud, you understand the terrifying truth. In an age of blind faith, the most dangerous contraband of all is a second opinion. The fire in the center of the clearing spits and hisses, casting long, dancing shadows that make the forest feel alive and watchful. A goat is led into the circle. Its eyes are not filled with terror, but a strange, placid calm, as if it understands its part in this ancient play. The village priestess, not a cackling hag, but a woman with lines of wisdom etched around her eyes, lays a hand on its slank, whispering words too old for you to fully comprehend. The weapon is just paper, but it is sharper than any axe. You stare at the lie on the vellum, at the forged seal that condemns your people to be tenants on their own sacred ground. The knowledge is a poison. The truth is a death sentence. To reveal this map is to accuse a powerful lord and the king himself of theft. To keep it hidden is to let the lie become history. To let your ancestors' graves be plowed over by a stranger's oxen. The torch gutters, casting your face in flickering light and deep shadow. The other was decentralized, built on longships and sagas, distributing knowledge to anyone brave enough to seek it. It valued freedom in the here and now. The centralized world couldn't compete with that freedom, so it demonized it. It couldn't control their herbal medicine, so it burned the healers as witches. It couldn't win the argument, so it murdered the storytellers and called their knowledge demonic. The savage Viking was the first great character assassination, a lie so total it has poisoned history for 1,000 years. This is the forbidden blueprint of control. As you finish, your skin tingling and alive, you realize the first battle you fight every day isn't with an axe, but with a bucket of cold water. You are fighting a story, a shadow that will outlive your entire civilization. You are clean, you are groomed, and you are human. But what you are just beginning to understand is why this simple truth is so profoundly threatening to the new world rising in the South. Why is a bar of soap in your hand more dangerous to them than a sword? He speaks of his children's hunger, of the coming winter that now looks like a death sentence. There is a low, guttural murmur from the crowd, the sound of 100 private judgments being weighed at once. 99% of people believe Viking society was ruled by the strongest arm and the sharpest blade, a chaotic free-for-all. What they don't want you to understand is that it was governed by a legal system so complex and so personal, it made feudalism look like a children's game. They painted a simple picture of savage slavers because the alternative was a truth so dangerous it could shatter kingdoms. Buried in the Icelandic law codes, in texts like the Gragas, are the mechanics of freedom. They detail, with cold precision, how a thrall can work on holidays and keep the earnings. They lay out a path for a thrall to own property, to conduct business, to save, to buy the single most valuable thing in the world, himself. Einar is not just a captive. He's an entrepreneur in chains. The old man spits into the hearth, the sizzle of contempt against the glowing embers. They called our fathers demons, he rasps, his voice like stones grinding together. But they never tell you who summoned them. You lean closer, the rough wool of your tunic scratching your chin. Outside, the wind howls a lonely song against the timber walls of the longhouse. But inside, the only sound is the crackle of the fire and the old man's forbidden words. You feel the vibration of her low chant in your own chest, a hum that connects everyone here. The blade is swift. It is not a savage hack, but a precise, practiced movement. There is a single, final exhalation from the animal, a sigh of release. The only sound that follows is the soft, rhythmic drumming of blood pouring into a hollowed-out wooden bowl. It's an intimate, unnerving sound, like a secret heartbeat revealed. This is the moment the Christian chroniclers would describe as a horrific, demonic spectacle. The choice is yours, and the weight of it feels heavier than all the stones around you. It's the playbook used by every empire since. You create a terrifying other, the barbarian, the heretic, the terrorist, to scare your own population into obedience. You discredit and destroy alternative ways of living, healing, and governing. You rewrite history in real time. The Dark Ages were not an accident. They were a deliberately engineered information blackout. The lie didn't end when the last longship rotted into the sand. That was just the dress rehearsal. They saw how easily a story could conquer a people. They learned how to make us fear the very idea of a world they don't control. The bitterness in your breakfast is a secret the church would kill to keep. It's a ghost on your tongue, an ancient truth stirred into the grain. You lift the horn spoon to your mouth, the motion slow, almost reverent in the smoky half-light of the longhouse. The porridge is thick, a simple gruel of oats and water, but the flavor is a wild map of the earth, the peat of the bog, the iron of the soil, and that sharp, medicinal tang that clings to the back of your throat. This isn't just food. It's a rebellion in a bowl. The truth, hidden in the sagas they later tried to burn, is that you were judged not by a distant lord, but by the very people whose betrayal would hurt you the most. The law speaker, an old man whose eyes hold the memory of 1,000 such disputes, motions for Bjorn to speak. His authority comes not from a bloodline, but from the fact he can recite the entire legal code of your people from memory. The law isn't a book chained in a monastery. It's a living thing, breathing in the lungs of the community. Every precise cut of his blade, every perfectly fitted plank, earns him more than just a nod from the Jarl. It earns him leverage, respect, and coin. Coin he hides in a leather pouch that never leaves his body. He is a living, breathing indictment of the freedom you were born into. As a serf, you are bound to your lord's land from birth until death. Your children will be born into the same dirt, the same debt. You have no path out. Einar, the slave, does. He is Einar, and he remembers the stories his grandfather told him. Stories that were never meant to be carved into runes or written on calfskin. The air is thick with the smell of peat smoke, sweat, and drying herbs hanging from the rafters. Your shadow, thrown long and dancing by the firelight, merges with those of the other hushed figures around you. But what you see, what you feel, is a wave of communal grief and gratitude. This is not a scent of horror. It is the sweet metallic scent of transformation, of life given so that life may continue. They don't want you to know the truth. This ritual, this blot, was never about bloodlust. It was about cosmic balance and community survival. You watch as the blood is used to anoint stones, to mark the foreheads of the elders, a symbol of the life force that flows through all things. Every single part of the animal will be used. The carvings on the whalebone tablet whisper a secret that could get you burned alive. It's a truth, not about faith, but about physics, and it's been buried under 1,000 years of prayer and fear. The air in the cellar is a cold, wet weight in your lungs, thick with the smell of damp earth and something older, the faint mineral scent of bone. The single flame of your tallow lamp throws your shadow, a monstrous, dancing giant, against the curved stone walls. Your fingers, numb with cold, trace the lines etched into the polished surface of the tablet. They lied about the entire past. Look around you. Listen to the silence. What else are they lying about now? The steam rises, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp wool. Outside, the world is a symphony of misery. The wet slap of mud, the distant, hollow cough of a neighbor who won't see the spring. You can hear the lowing of cattle through the wattle and daub walls, their breath misting in the frigid air. The sound of your own spoon scraping against the rough-hewn wood of your bowl is a small, private thunder. It's an ASMR quality scratch that says, "I am still here. I am still eating. I am still alive." As Bjorn begins his defense, denying the theft with a tremor in his voice, you realize the true nature of the threat. This is why the church and the monarchies to the south see your people as godless savages. Their power relies on a divine pyramid, with God at the top, the king beneath him, and you at the very bottom, born to obey. This circle of dirt and grass suggests that power is a web, not a pyramid. It suggests a truth so profound it could shatter empires. That law is simply an agreement between people. This is the unthinkable paradox that could spark a rebellion in the heart of any peasant who learned of it. It's the same tactic you see in your own time, where complex systems of wage slavery and corporate control are hidden behind simple, comforting narratives of opportunity. As the sun bleeds across the water, Einar pauses. He runs a calloused thumb over the curve of the hull, his eyes seeing not just a ship, but a price. He is a slave, building the very instrument of freedom that will carry others to glory. Einar picks up a small knife and begins to whittle a piece of birch, the blade scraping against the wood, making a soft, rhythmic shk, shk, shk that feels like the pulse of the secret he is about to share. The world knows the story of Lindisfarne, he continues, his eyes milky with age, but fixed on something far away, a memory from 793. They weep for their innocent monks, cut down by the savage Northmen, who came from the sea like a nightmare. The meat is already being prepared for the feast that will ensure your village has the strength to face the winter. The hide will become a cloak for a newborn child. The bones will be carved into needles and tools. Nothing is wasted. This is the very definition of reverence. It's a truth so powerful that a new religion had to burn it from the pages of history. The church twisted this sacred act of survival into devil worship for one simple, brutal reason: to destroy a worldview where humanity had a direct, transactional relationship with the divine. You've seen this before, this map of the night sky. But in the frantic terror of its discovery, you missed the most important detail. Now, in the suffocating silence, you see it. The constellations aren't just patterns. They have names, ancient names, names that are forbidden. Odin, Thor, Freya. A cold shock, sharp and electric, jolts through you. It's a feeling of vertigo, as if the stone floor has just dropped away into a black abyss. 99% of people look at the old myths, the stories of Asgard, of giants and gods, and see the charming, primitive superstitions of a dead people. 99% of the world believes that medieval medicine is a clumsy dance between prayer and the bloodletter's knife. They believe your only hope against the coughing sickness or the bloody flux is a priest's Latin chant and a relic that may or may not be the finger bone of a saint. That's the official story. That's the version they want you to believe. But what they don't want you to know is that your ancestors, the Norsemen, practiced a sophisticated form of herbalism, leechcraft, that the church has spent centuries trying to burn from memory. It's the same fear that haunts modern governments when they see power decentralizing. They call it chaos, a threat to stability. Whether it's a populist movement born online or a cryptocurrency that operates beyond their control. But it's not the lack of rules they fear. It's the loss of their monopoly on making them. They fear the day you realize you don't need their permission to agree on what is just. Bjorn's voice drops, becoming conspiratorial. He doesn't just deny stealing the animals. He hints at why they might have gone missing. But as you watch him, a terrifying question, cold and sharp as the wind, begins to form in your mind. Who in this world is truly in chains? They paint us as beasts who thirst for Christian blood and gold, an evil that appeared from nowhere. He pauses, and the silence in the room feels heavy, ancient. It is a brilliant story, and it is the most powerful lie ever told. What 99% of people will never know, what the monks who wrote the histories deliberately buried, is the 30 years of blood that came before. Einar's knife stills, a world that didn't require a priest's intervention, a bishop's blessing, or a pope's decree. It's a classic tactic of cultural demolition, and you see its shadow today every time a corporation co-opts and sanitizes an indigenous spiritual practice for profit, selling you a hollow echo of a truth they first helped to destroy. This ritual isn't evil. It's a sustainable, holistic philosophy The church had to erase to sell its own. They had to make you afraid of the old gods so you would run into the arms of their new one. A failed religion, crushed by the light of the one true God. That is the story you have been taught. It is the lie that holds the world together. But what if it wasn't a religion at all? Your gaze fixes on the cluster of stars marked Thor. You remember the forbidden stories whispered by your grandmother, her voice a dry rustle of leaves, before the priest warned her that such tales were gateways for demons. Thor, the thunder god, riding his chariot of goats across the sky, his hammer Mjolnir crashing down to create the lightning. The bitter taste in your porridge is bogbean, a humble plant that grows in the wettest, sourest parts of the land. To a priest, it's a weed. To you, it's life. It is packed with a power they can't explain and don't control. Vitamin C. It's the invisible armor against the scurvy that rots Christian sailors from the inside out, turning their gums black and their joints to fire. While their cities are crippled by a disease born of ignorance, you are consuming the antidote for breakfast. He speaks of a debt owed, a tribute to a power no one dares name, the same shadowy figure who supplied the forbidden herbs that failed to save the chieftain's wife last season. The air grows thick. The sound of a leather strap being tightened nervously is the only thing that breaks the quiet. This is no longer about a stolen cow. This is about the dark secret rotting at the heart of your village, the one everyone knows, but no one speaks of. The scraping sound from beneath the floorboards isn't rats. It's the sound of a world being saved and a secret being buried, all with the same deliberate stroke of a blade. You pull your thin wool blanket tighter, the damp cold of the earthen floor seeping into your bones. In the corner of the hut, by the hesitant glow of a single tallow lamp, an old man works. His name is Einar, but that is a name for the wind. To you, he is simply grandfather. To the south, he whispers, his voice dropping. A great Christian king, Charlemagne, was carving out an empire with a cross in one hand and a bloodied axe in the other. For a generation, he waged war on the Saxons, our cousins, our neighbors. This wasn't a war of territory. It was a war on their souls. You can almost feel the cold dread of it. Imagine being told your gods are now illegal. Your sacred groves, where your ancestors have worshipped for 1,000 years, are to be chopped down and burned. They had to destroy this idea, the idea that you could manage your own soul, because if they let this one truth survive, the entire foundation of their control would have crumbled, and the other darker secrets they kept locked in their cold stone churches might have come spilling out into the light. It's a child's story, except what if it's not? What if it's a diagram, a mnemonic device, a sophisticated piece of peer-to-peer education designed for a culture that passed its knowledge through breath and memory, not ink and parchment? The buildup of opposing forces in the clouds, the tension, the sudden violent discharge of energy, the hammer's strike, the deafening roar that follows, the rumble of his chariot. It's not a myth about a god causing a storm. It's a breathtakingly elegant lesson in atmospheric physics, packaged in a story so compelling you could never forget it. Your breath catches. Recent archaeological analysis of Viking latrine pits, the unfiltered truth of history, confirms a diet rich in these forgotten medicinal plants. The evidence was buried in their waste for 1,000 years. This knowledge is a profound threat. It undermines the very foundation of the Church's power, which rests on a single terrifying premise, that they hold the monopoly on healing. If a village woman with knowledge of roots and leaves can cure a fever that a bishop's prayer cannot, then who truly holds the power of life and death? This is why they hunt them, why they brand them witches. A secret of a hidden economy, a hidden power that operates in the forest, in the night. Einar's face goes pale. He didn't just accuse a thief, he stumbled into a conspiracy. The law speaker's gaze sweeps across the assembly. It rests on you. You are not a spectator. You are the judge, the jury. Your murmur of assent or denial, when added to the others, will become the verdict. A verdict that could mean a simple fine, or it could mean declaring Bjorn an outlaw, a wolf's head, to be hunted by anyone, with no legal consequence. Your throat is dry. His knuckles are swollen like river stones. His face a roadmap of winters, but his hands are steady. A sliver of yew wood rests across his lap. With a sharpened piece of flint, he carves, shk, 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 shk. The sound is a dry whisper, the only noise besides your own ragged breath and the low moan of the wind through the wattle walls. He is carving the strange, angular symbols you have seen your whole life. Runes. What they don't want you to know is that these are not just letters. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. The powerful tell you history is written by scribes on fragile parchment, a truth owned by kings and locked away by priests. They buried the real secret for 1,000 years. 99% of history wasn't written on paper that could be burned. It was carved into things that last. Night bleeds through the cracks in the wattle and daub, and the hot grows cold. The fire is a fistful of dying embers, painting the darkness with nervous orange light. Then you hear it again, the sound that has haunted the edges of your days. A rhythmic, patient scraping. Scrape, scrape. You feel the scrape of your own fingernail against an incised line on the tablet, an ASMR quality rasp that is the only sound in the world. You look at another carving, Odin, the Allfather, hanging himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, sacrificing one of his eyes for a single drink from the well of wisdom. The priests call it a story of pagan vanity, but you see it now with new eyes. It's a perfect, brutal metaphor for the scientific method, the agonizing, painful pursuit of knowledge. The woman who taught you about bogbean, about willow bark for pain and yarrow for wounds, lives in the shadows, her wisdom a heresy. Every healer they burn at the stake is a library of priceless medical knowledge turned to ash. It's the medieval version of a global pharmaceutical corporation discovering a simple, natural plant that cures cancer, and then burying the research, silencing the scientists, and bankrupting the small labs that found it. Because a cure that grows from the earth for free threatens a multi-billion-dollar industry built on sickness. You look from Einar's desperate eyes to Bjorn's fearful ones, and you understand. This judgment isn't about livestock anymore. It's about whether you expose the secret that is slowly poisoning you all, or whether you silence the man who dared to speak of it. And you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that your choice will either save your neighbor's life or sign your own death warrant. 99% of people, even in your own time, believe the runes were a crude alphabet for a crude people, or worse, the demonic scratches of pagan magic. The priests say so from their stone pulpits, their voices echoing in a space built to make you feel small. They are lying. They lie because they are terrified. They are not afraid of forgotten gods. They are afraid of an information network they cannot control. You watch grandfather's fingers trace a symbol like a fractured branch. It doesn't just mean birch tree. It is a key. It was a major center of Northumbrian royal power, a wealthy and strategic symbol of that very same Christian expansion. It was an ideological fortress, an outpost for the culture that was committing genocide just across the water. The raid was not a random act of piracy. Einar's voice grows stronger, fueled by old rage. It was a message, a retaliation. You burn our sacred trees, we will burn your holy house. You slaughter our kin for their faith, we will show you what real fear is. Not the sound of an animal, not the wind. It's the sound of a tool on wood, a secret task performed in the heart of the sleeping dark. A dreadful curiosity, cold and sharp as a needle, pushes you from your straw pallet. You press your ear to the packed earth floor. It's coming from below. You crawl, your breath fogging in the frigid air, your hands mapping the uneven surface. And there, one of the floorboards gives a little, a hollow give that doesn't feel right. Your fingernails, already cracked with dirt and labor, dig into the splintery edge. The willingness to sacrifice a part of yourself, your time, your comfort, your old certainties, even your very way of seeing the world, for one pure, undeniable drop of truth. This is the secret the church had to destroy. Not a rival faith, something far more dangerous, a system of knowledge that taught people to find answers in the world around them, not in a holy book. It taught them to observe, to question, to codify the laws of nature into epic sagas. It empowered the individual, turning every person into a potential scientist, a student of reality. The control of health is, and has always been, the control of life itself. You take another spoonful, the bitter taste now feeling less like medicine and more like defiance. You are participating in a quiet, daily act of treason against the established order. A thought flickers through your mind, cold and sharp. The ring you wear, the one that's turning your finger green. Could the metal itself be poisoning you slowly? You push the thought away. It's just a fear. Another shadow in a world full of them. Suddenly, the hide flap covering the doorway is ripped aside. The greatest weapon the Vikings possessed wasn't the axe in their hand. It was the woman who held the keys to the world they left behind. You are standing on a shore of black stones, the wind a thief that steals the warmth from your face. The air is thick with the smell of salt, wet wood, and drying fish. A longship, its dragon prow weary from the waves, scrapes against the gravel of the beach, its belly swollen with silver, silks, and foreign spices. A single rune can unlock a whole verse of a memorized poem, and that poem contains the precise mixture of willow bark and bog myrtle needed to soothe the fever. Another symbol, like a tilted spear, isn't just a letter. It's a trigger for a legal precedent, a story of a boundary dispute from 100 years ago that proves your neighbor's fence is on your family's land. The attack wasn't the beginning of an age of terror. It was the inevitable answer to one. The story of demonic pagans attacking peaceful men of God was perfect propaganda. It was the justification Charlemagne and the Christian kings needed to galvanize all of Europe, to launch a holy war against the defiant North. It's the oldest trick in history, a tactic you see even in your own modern world. Create a narrative of victimhood to justify your own aggression. A false flag, flown from a burning monastery. You pull, it resists. then groans like a dying man, and comes loose in your hands. A rectangle of absolute blackness opens up in the floor. The smell hits you first, a wave of cool, damp earth, the ghost of last winter's turnips, and something else, something ancient. The scent of old leather and oiled wood. It is the smell of secrets. Holding a smoldering branch from the fire, you lower yourself into the hole. Your bare feet find the rungs of a crude ladder. It's the same struggle you see echoes of even in your own modern world. The unending conflict between open inquiry and a dogmatic system that demands faith over evidence. The Norse gods weren't a religion, they were a forbidden science. And the story of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the great final battle, it wasn't a prophecy about the end of the world. It was the memory of the end of their worldview. A blast of icy wind tears through the longhouse, making the central fire hiss and spit. A woman stumbles in, her face a mask of terror, her breath coming in white, panicked clouds. It's Alara from the next croft over. Her eyes are wide, scanning the dim interior, past the chieftain mending his nets, past the families huddled for warmth. She doesn't look for authority. She doesn't look for a priest. Her desperate gaze is searching for something else entirely. In her arms, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, is her son. The men who spill from it are giants, their beards braided with triumphs, their eyes still holding the gray of the open sea. But they are not the center of this world. Their eyes, all of them, turn to her. She stands apart from the chaos of the unloading, a still point in the turning world. The chieftain's wife. But you misunderstand the word. Wife is a cage. A third, like a ship's sail, unlocks a star chart kept only in the mind, a map that doesn't exist on any parchment but can guide a boat through the fog to the rich fishing grounds no one else can find. This is the secret internet of the North, a vast, decentralized database of knowledge, encrypted not by code, but by memory, poetry, and story. It holds genealogies, medical texts, astronomical charts, and laws. Its servers are the minds of the rune masters. You feel a profound chill crawl up your spine, a coldness the fire cannot touch. The entire Viking age, the sagas, the stereotypes, the history you thought you knew, it may all be founded on a single, deliberate, world-changing lie. And as Einar stares into the flames, you wonder how many other truths are still buried beneath the weight of the victor's ink. The space is small, a root cellar dug deep into the earth, cleverly shielded from the world above. A place safe from fire, safe from a casual raid. But this cellar holds more than withered carrots. Shelves, cut directly into the earth walls, are lined with impossible things. Not books. Books are for monks and lords. This is something else entirely. Something real. You see a long, yellowed piece of whalebone, covered in a complex web of etched lines connecting dozens of names. It was the historical account of the death of their entire knowledge system, systematically dismantled, demonized, and replaced by a new ideology that insisted the only light worth seeing came from heaven, not from the stars you could map with your own two eyes. The whalebone in your hands feels impossibly heavy now. It is not an artifact. It is an accusation, evidence of a grand theft of human intellect, a murder of a way of knowing. Suddenly, a sound from above, the heavy thud of a boot on the floorboards of the great hall. Then another.